My name is Catherine Price. I'm the Division Manager for Education and Engagement at the Cumberland River Compact. And we are excited to partner with the City of Hendersonville as well as several other municipalities to help promote best practices in stormwater management, in design, and really try to advance the field. So if you aren't familiar with our organization, our mission is to enhance the health and enjoyment of the Cumberland River and its tributaries. We do that through education, collaboration, and action. We work on root causes of water quality issues, and so our work looks like a lot of different things. Today is just one very kind of small part of the work that we do, but our work is broad and multifaceted across the Cumberland River Basin. We work on large-scale stream restoration projects to restore and enhance streams. We work in urban areas on addressing the unique issues that we find with water quality in urban areas. So, for example, restoring urban tree canopy, depaving areas where we have impermeable space we no longer need, and replacing that with green and spongy area. And finally, we work on working land. So we work to promote practices that are good for both agriculture and for water quality and soil health as well. But today we're excited to be here in Hendersonville, and I do want to let you all know about the next upcoming event that we have in this training series is going to be on January 15th. It's going to be completely virtual, and it is going to be focused on how to use and better use urban forestry for improved stormwater management. And this will be led by Jason Sprouse with the Cumberland River Compact. He's our urban forestry manager and a certified arborist and a lot of experience in urban forestry. So definitely stay tuned for information about that so you can learn a little bit more about how to design with urban forestry in mind. But today we have a presentation, and I only have two lovely pictures up here, but we have several speakers, so just want to make sure everyone has a chance to be introduced as we get started today. We are going to be hearing from Christine Guy Baker with CEC. Her focus has been in the water resources field, including experience with hydrologic and hydraulic monitoring and modeling, complex drainage basin analysis, floodplain management, MS4 and PDES compliance, and erosion prevention and sediment control. She's also joined by Jeanette Wolf with CEC, who's the public sector lead, who might be answering questions throughout today as well. And then with the City of Hendersonville, you will be hearing from Christina Bannister, who is a stormwater inspector, as well as Helen Morrison, who is the stormwater manager. So before I kick it over to them to get started with today's presentation, just a reminder again for those who are in person, please make sure you sign in at the front sign-in sheet. If you are watching virtually, I'm going to ask that you please introduce yourself in the comments of that YouTube stream so we can understand who's attending, because right now we can just see, how many folks are there. We want to know who is attending as well. If you have questions throughout the presentation and you are online, please feel free to add those into the live stream. I will be answering those or asking those questions. I will not be answering them. You want these other folks to answer them, but I'll be asking them on your behalf. So please just be sure to be detailed in your question and be specific about the wording so I can communicate that in the best manner possible to our experts here in the room today. So with that, I think we've got Christine up first, and I will turn it over to her. Thanks, Christine.
Hey everybody, so my portion of the presentation is going to be covering what recent changes occurred to the municipal code involving the stormwater regulations. So that's mainly involving Title 18, the water and storm sewer section. And so I'm just going to hit the highlights. Really, if you are doing development within the city of Hendersonville, I recommend that you take a look at it and get the full scope of the changes, just so that you understand everything that you might need to know when you're developing in Hendersonville. But this should cover some really big highlights of things that changed through the revisions. So the first thing I want to cover is why. Why are we making a revision to the previous code and the previous stormwater regulations? And the real reason for that is that the state came out with 2 revisions to their main permits that affect stormwater quality in the state of Tennessee. And the first revision that happened was to the construction general permit, which probably a lot of them you are aware of, because that affected how you got coverage from the state. And then there was also a revision to TDEC's general small MS4 permit, which is basically what governs the municipality of Hendersonville and any discharges that occur from a stormwater standpoint into waters of the state. And so most of the changes are necessitated by this 2022 revision to the small MS4 permit, but there were also some revisions that were necessitated by the CGP. So from the MS4 permit, the city of Hendersonville was required to make updates to their ordinance or any other regulatory mechanisms that they had within 24 months of the effective date of the MS4 permit. And so that meant that they were needed to make those changes and be in effect required by September of 2024. I think we got really close to that day. I think our second reading was just maybe in October or something like that. So we're in effect with the new regulations. So that is what's going on. And so we are moving into the implementation phase of the ordinance and making sure that everybody has a general understanding of what is required, and just helping you guys out, try to figure out what's needed so that we can make the process as smooth as we possibly can. So one of the main things that we wanted to clear up with the ordinance changes is when you've got to do what, when. And the way we did that was by putting this all into a chart to hopefully make it more clear as to what types of things you needed to do when you had certain types of disturbances. And so basically along the top, you kind of have different key milestones that you would need to hit. So you've got land disturbance permit required, which basically means that you're going to make a submittal to the city of Hendersonville through the Public Works Department. And then you have EPSC plans required, which is another piece, which some of that will happen through a different process that I'm sure Helen will talk about when there's just EPSC plans required but not a land disturbance permit. That's a little bit weird, but I'm sure we'll cover that later. And then the other thing is the water quality riparian buffer requirements. And then you've got the water quality design requirement. And so for any land use, excluding commercial or industrial that's less than an acre and not a common plan of development or sale. So like, let's say you had like a one-off home development that was isolated that was less than an acre disturbance. That's what we're talking about. And so there would be a more simple form for you to fill out involving EPSC, but there's a general understanding that EPSC would be required on the site, and then water quality riparian buffers would be required, but it's a reduced amount from the CGP amount, which we'll cover in a couple slides. And then you've got commercial and industrial land uses that are less than an acre, not part of common plan of development or sale. So for that instance, we had a Brewster's that came up. It was just under that acre of disturbance. So that it'd be something kind of like that, where you have just under an acre of disturbance, and you're still developing that land, and that's when you're going to have to do the land disturbance permit, the EPSC plans, and do the water quality riparian buffers if that's applicable to your site. And then the last line is, for any disturbance on any land use, when it's 1 acre or greater, or it's a common plan of development or sale, then you're going to have to be required to do all of that. And that section is completely in line with the CGP and the MS4 permit. When you go over an acre of disturbance or you're a part of common plan of development or sale, that's when all of that stuff becomes required from a state standpoint. And then there's a little asterisk here that potentially there could be additional requirements at the discretion of the city engineer. That's just there, there could be, you could have a really interesting lot that has, floodplain on it. It could have really weird, you could have like a really high chance of having pollutants be discharged from your lot. That's the type of things that the city of Hendersonville would be trying to capture. Those are just some examples. It could be other things too. So that's why it's always good if you've got something that you're thinking about developing. It never hurts to have a conversation with the city and just kind of figure out what you're going to need to do. Okay, so then these are just some of the EPSC updates that I felt like were more important. So with the current CGP that's out, it allows for disturbances to go over 50 acres with some additional requirements from TDEC. The city, you know, it's very difficult to manage a site that has more than 50 acres disturbed at one time, especially from a municipality standpoint, because they've got to have boots on the ground inspecting that as well per their MS4 permit. And so what we wanted to do is provide them some help on that standpoint of making sure that they can meet their permit requirements, but you guys could also disturb over 50 acres if you truly needed to do that. And so currently the requirement is that if you're going to exceed that, you'd have to meet all the requirements per the CGP with TDEC, which includes some monitoring and sending a shapefile of your disturbance and some things like that. But in addition to that, from the city standpoint, they're going to want to see twice monthly LDP audits that would be performed by either a PE, RLA, or somebody that has TDEC Level 2 certification. And basically, the city would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, the city would be requesting someone to do that specifically, and then you guys would be reimbursing the city back for that inspection so that they basically are supplementing their staff, because once it goes over 50 acres, that's a really big burden on them considering they only have one inspector. And so that's the entire thought process here. We're not saying you can't do it, but we're saying, hey, we got to get help, because that's a significant amount of disturbance, and we still got to hit our requirements. So that's the main thing here with the 50 acres or more. The other additional thing is if you're going to have get a land disturbance permit that involves calculations and associated EPSC plans, then they need to be prepared by a PE or an RLA that has an active TDEC Level 2 certification. Now, there is a caveat in the ordinance that states that if you are a registered PE or an RLA that does not have an active Level 2 certification, you can do that, but once we get to a third submittal where we're providing comments on the EPSC plans, then that engineer or RLA is going to be responsible for the third-party consultant's invoices relating to how much that EPSC review costs. And that's really just to offset the cost to the city. There's a significant amount of cost in making sure that these plan reviews get done and that they meet the standards that are necessary for the city, for them to feel good about them carrying out the requirements of their permit. And so this is just kind of a little thing of like, hey, make sure you're following the rules. Theoretically, you should know what the rules are, because hopefully you're taking training from the state that's carried out through the state via the TDEC Level 2 certification. And then that would help you be able to put together a cleaner set of plans that would meet the requirements of the CGP. And this is effective after 6 months of the adoption. So this would be, October, November, December, March. Okay, so March 10th, that's when this would be effective. So just kind of keep that on your radar and consider that. Another EPSC update that we have involves when you can remove sediment basins or sediment traps. So basically, we're just requesting that the city be notified prior to the removal of sediment basins or sediment traps. So 14 days prior to removing those, if you can contact the city will come out there and take a look at it, confirm that everything that's upgrading of those has been stabilized appropriately. Then they'll give you the clearance that you can go ahead and convert that or remove it entirely. We've had some instances where they've gotten converted too early, and the site just really wasn't ready for that. And so that's the main reason for this, because it's not going to be a fun conversation if the city tells you that you've got to put a sediment basin back in after you just went through converting it to another pond, or maybe you filled it in. And so that's really what this is for, so that you guys are on the same page with the city about when this happens, because those are significant drainage areas if a sediment basin or a sediment trap is required. It's a lot of water. That means that there could be a significant discharge of sediment, which would be very bad for the city and them trying to meet their requirements in terms of water quality. The other thing that got updated was LDP duration section. And so basically, if you pull an LDP, you get that green light from them, then they will stay active until you either have one of these things happen. So if you have 6 months of no activity on the site, so you're not moving dirt, like there's an obvious thing that nothing is happening on the site, then that would be your permit duration that it would expire. Or it's 3 years from the issuance of the permit, or if any new federal or state regulations like occur that change the scope of coverage. So that would just be like if a new CGP is issued or a new MS4 permit is issued that backdates some of those requirements. You might be aware that when the 2021 CGP came out, there were projects that were ongoing, had to take a look at that and see what changes needed to be made in order to get them to the new standards. So that's kind of what we're talking about. We're not talking about anything really outside the realm of reason. We're just saying, like, if the state imposes new regulations on the city, then theoretically you might have to resubmit for new coverage because of those changes. So that's that. And then this goes into the water quality riparian buffer things. So this is what I was talking about for the 2 upper rows of the chart where you're not disturbing greater than an acre or, and you're not part of a common plan of development or sale. If the chart says that you're required to do water quality riparian buffers, which I believe was for the whole entire chart, so any disturbance basically, if you're along a stream, then you should have at least a 15-foot buffer from the top of bank. So that's this requirement. It's pretty reasonable coming from a floodplain perspective. If that stream is mapped or it's unmapped or something like that, there's also additional floodplain requirements. So in general, this is not too big of an ask because if you have an unmapped stream, that means that FEMA has not designated a floodplain for it. You have to provide a buffer of twice the width of the stream on either side of the stream. So if the stream is 7 feet, you're already at 14 feet. So just something to think about. Unless you had a really small stream, you'd probably be hitting this anyway. And then for A zones, it's very similar that you have to have 20 foot of offset from the top of bank. So that's greater than this. And then if you've got a full-blown mapped stream, if any of you guys have dealt with that type of property where it has a floodway associated with it, that's usually significantly larger than the buffer width that's usually required on those properties. It just kind of depends. Sometimes there's like a high wall, like some of you probably have seen Mansker Creek, where usually one side of Mansker Creek is just a straight cliff wall. That's a little bit weird because usually the floodway hugs that wall. But in a lot of instances, the floodway is actually larger than that. And that's my spiel on floodplains. But basically, like, if you've got a stream on your property, just know that there's some extra things that you're going to have to think about. And I would highly suggest just talking with the city, figuring out what those requirements are so that you know from the very beginning what you're going to need to know.
Just to further
clarify
something that I had asked you originally, this is for any you want to
Yeah, I could repeat you.
What I was going to say, for any development for unmapped streams, like, so it doesn't,
Yeah, this is
or anything, it's for any development.
Yeah, the floodplain requirement, so what the city needs to do in order to stay in the National Flood Insurance Program, which basically ensures that if there's a home or any sort of building that is located within a floodplain, then they're required to buy insurance. That insurance is supplemented. I don't want to say supplemented. It's the price of it is discounted. I'm not using the right word there, but kind of like it's reduced because the United States helps cover that. So in order to stay in that program that allows for the coverage to be less than what it would typically be if you were located in a floodplain because you are at a high risk of flooding, they have to follow certain regulations. Those regulations don't have any disturbance limits on them. They don't care if you are, doing something significantly ridiculous in the floodway. Like it could be that you are putting in a electric pole or something like that. Theoretically, the city needs to know about that so they consider that and whether or not that is going to impact their ability to be within the program. So basically, all that to say, yeah.
The program is really for the residents.
Yes.
It protects
So as Stephen said, the program protects the right for people to be able to buy insurance. It protects the pricing of it. And so that's the whole entire purpose of the program. It was a subsidy. That's the word I wanted to use. It's a subsidized program for insurance. And so that's why it's weird. If you've got a stream and you're planning to get close to it, you should talk to the city because there's some floodplain requirements. And then also these requirements might also come into play depending on the amount of disturbance. So floodplains, they're fun. Then this buffer right here that's on this screen is what would be required if you're doing disturbances greater than or equal to an acre or part of a common plan of a development or sale. So if you're along a water or in a watershed that has a water with available parameters for siltation or sedimentation, which that's just a fancy way of saying the water is not impaired for sediment, meaning that TDEC has gone out and tested the water. They don't feel like that it is impaired for sediment, meaning it doesn't have a significant sediment load to them. Then you are able to have a 15-foot minimum or a 30-foot average measured from each side of the stream. And then if you are in an area where you're discharging to an exceptional Tennessee water or a water that is impaired for sediment or siltation or habitat alteration. And then this is an additional thing, waters with federally or state threatened and endangered aquatic animal species. As some of you may know, the city of Hendersonville has a lot of streamside salamander, which is a state threatened endangered species. So that's kind of the caveat for this one. Sometimes there is a significant gap between finding that species and TDEC being able to put it on the exceptional Tennessee waters list. And in an effort to protect that species more, this is how the city of Hendersonville has decided to do this. So definitely something to consider if you're nearby a stream that it's already been listed as an ETW for streamside salamander, then you're probably going to want to at least have someone take a look and see if that species is located on your property. And that's going to be something that the city is going to probably be asking you about during the review process, but also if you talk to them before it and they know that there's likely presence, then that's something that you can figure out way on the front end. So it's always good to have some initial conversations with the city before you plan on doing anything just wild and crazy, especially if you got a lot of streams where this buffer is going to impact your buildable space. There are some allowable, permissible uses within that permanent water quality buffer, and these are all listed in the ordinance. So greenways, biking trails, walking trails are allowed. Within the outer buffer, you still have to have that minimum unless you're going to go an ARAP route and have like a crossing or something like that. So the trails have to be constructed of pervious materials if they're going to be just like a completely like allowable use and you don't have to offset them. If it's constructed of impervious materials, then you either have to direct that runoff to an infiltration-based SCM, or in my opinion, the easier way to handle this is to just provide that additional buffer width somewhere else, like either alongside the trail on the other side of it or somewhere else on the property, but that's usually the easier way to handle that. You can also have infiltration-based SCMs in the buffer, but you're going to have to make sure that you have infiltration in those areas, which it is usually difficult to have infiltration right next to a stream because the groundwater table is high, so think about that before you try to do that. It's probably not going to work out necessarily. And then you could have road and utility crossings and selective landscaping and or habitat improvements. So this is usually where I'm like, infiltration-based SCM, what's an SCM? An SCM is a stormwater control measure. It's a big part of the new MS4 permit. From TDEC's perspective, it's a permanent practice and a measure designed to reduce the discharge of pollutants from new development or redevelopment projects. You've probably seen these a lot in other cities, so it could be permeable pavement, bioretention, to a certain extent it could be extended detention if designed correctly, infiltration trenches, it could be a proprietary practice such as like a filtration system, It could even be paired with a hydrodynamic separator potentially. So those are the types of measures that we're talking about for that, which kind of brings me into the water quality treatment volume requirement. So this is another big thing. And so if we are looking on the third row, so if you're disturbing over an acre, if you're part of a common plan of development or sale, then you're going to have to follow this water quality treatment volume chart. And we've done another presentation in detail about this chart, and I put the link to this on this slide, and I'm sure that this will be published or sent to you guys in an email. So I highly recommend just taking a look at that video, because I don't want to rehash all this, but just know that like this is an additional requirement. It's new. TDEC got it passed via a rule that was passed, and then they included it into the permit. So this is something that's going to be sticking around for a while. So I recommend, you know, figuring it out and learning to work with it, because it's here. And then alongside that, you can probably guess that because we have that chart, because it is required by anything that disturbs greater than an acre, a part of a common plan of development or sale, we're going to have a lot of these things, which is, you know, just as exciting for you guys as it is for the city, because they've got an additional thing that they have to worry about too. So, in this, the permit requires that they come up with a way to make sure that these things are installed the way that they were put on the plans within 90 days of final construction of the SEM, which, I mean, hopefully to you guys, like, it's just as exciting for them, because then now they've got something else that they've got to track and make sure and run around and be like, oh my God, was it installed? Was it installed correctly? Do I have proper documentation? Because if not, TDEC is going to be mad at me. And so in the ordinance, we've included what that means, like what information we'll need at the end of the 90 days, hopefully sooner. I mean, as soon as you get that thing in the ground, you're probably trying to really finish up your site, get UNO, things like that. So you don't have to wait the whole 90 days. As soon as you get it into the ground, then you can start trying to finalize this piece. And then there's this list is largely things that TDEC is requiring the city keep track of. So like the location of it, description of it, who the responsible party is, the inspection schedule, and photographs of the installed SEMs. I know that you guys, I've gotten some really good as-builts from, and I work with a lot of other municipalities. I've gotten a lot of really good pictures of during construction. Everybody has a cell phone, even if you've got a flip phone. You know, if you're installing an SEM, you've got it dug out and you're about to lay gravel in this pit, or you're laying down perforated pipe, take a picture of it. You'd be surprised how much that can tell somebody about the depth of it, or you know, whether or not you laid out matting appropriately, just different things, like whether or not you're following the detail. So it's super helpful. It helps you in the long run, because you can say, yeah, look at that. It's installed, like we dug down X feet. You can kind of tell from this picture. So this is talking about the installed SEMs, but I think it's helpful to have installation pictures, and I think that it provides a lot of backbone to what you're doing, especially if you're a developer or a contractor. So I highly recommend taking pictures throughout that process. Then you have, you know, now these things are in the ground. TDEC requires that they be able to treat the water that they're supposed to treat throughout their useful life. And how do we do that? The only way to do that really is to inspect the things and to maintain them. And so that's also something that TDEC is requiring that the city keep track of and make sure that people are inspecting and maintaining these things. So in the ordinance, it specifies that there has to be yearly inspections that are conducted by a PELA or a person that has successfully completed this specific training that involves SEM inspection and maintenance. And then there's also a different type of inspection that would be required every 5 years, and it basically is going to require you to provide similar information to this, not exactly all this information, because some of it deals with the as-built, but you know, information about what it looks like today, what inspections have occurred, what maintenance has been done on the SCM, things like that, because they have to have a tracker of all of these throughout the city and have to know when they were inspected and when they've been maintained. And then additionally, another requirement that's been in place for quite a while is that the city has to know where all of their stormwater inputs are. So if the city owns and it's dedicated and operated by the city, and there's an inlet on there, and then it discharges eventually into a water of the state, the city has to know where that is. And so a lot of this has been done over time by like consultants going out and physically mapping these areas. And so Hendersonville has a really good base for what's out there right now. But as we build and we get all these beautiful neighborhoods and all these people move into Hendersonville and it's great, we have to know where those inputs are again, because otherwise the city of Hendersonville would have to go out and map those again. I mean, the contractors are already out there. They're putting the things in the ground. They generally know where there are. So what we're asking for is to get the location of those, the direction of the flow. This is all information that TDEC asks of the city. So location, size, direction of flow, things like that. And we've tried to make it a little bit easier. I know it's difficult, but we've put together an Excel spreadsheet where you can just kind of list all of these assets, the flow direction, things like that, and that's going to help facilitate the city putting it from Excel into their GIS mapping program so that we don't have to have you guys put it into GIS for us. It'd be in a different format, and then it'd be a disaster. So once you're getting close to finishing out a project where it's going to have a lot of infrastructure that's going to be dedicated or operated by the city, I would reach out to the city because they have this Excel spreadsheet, and we can help explain that in any way that we need to in order to help facilitate that happening. And now I'm going to stop talking now. What? Yeah.
ACMs, are they going to be part of? I know you had a category there of treatment. Yeah, those there. Is that similar to what Metro has now? Is it 80% TSS?
Yes, there's TSS is used as an indicator. It has to be 80% TSS removal. The volume is what's largely different from Metro. Metro is, I believe, all based off of a 1-inch storm event, which is similar to the first row of this chart. So what happens is as you move down the chart, the volume gets larger, and so then the practices generally get larger in turn. So that's pretty much the basic thing for that. So it's similar, but not really. MS as well, Metro's permit will be updating too, because this was a state rule. So when they get there, they're not a small MS4, they're a large MS4. So when their individual permit gets updated, it will include this chart. So in the next couple of years, it will all be very similar, hopefully, across the state instead of having weird different requirements. Anybody else? Just before we move on, I guess? No? Okay.
All right, I'd like to welcome everybody here again. I'm Helen Morrison. I'm the Stormwater Coordinator for the city. I've been with the city since 2008, first serving as a police officer for the city and then transferring over to Stormwater in late 2015. So that's when all the real fun began, was when I came over to Stormwater. So I'm going to give you kind of just a brief description of where we've been at for the last 2 years. Kind of who's part of the Stormwater Division, and Christine did a really good job kind of talking about where we're at as far as MS4 compliance and what we're trying to accomplish. So obviously some of my main responsibilities are permit compliance, MS4 permit compliance and coordination, ensuring compliance with our Hendersonville Municipal Code, and then I do inspections when needed. Probably going to be doing a lot more here a little later on in the next couple of years for illicit discharge component of our program. Christina Bannister, sitting over here to my right, she's our stormwater inspector. She's been with the city a little over a year. We're very happy to have her. She completes the majority of our construction site inspections, our illicit discharge investigations when we get complaints about legal dumping, whatever that may be, whenever that may come in. She also completes our final stormwater inspections for construction sites. So she is very thorough, and she does a really good job, and we're really happy to have her. Christine talked about our MS4 permit compliance. As part of that compliance, we have to meet 6 minimum control measures, and I'm really going to focus on just one of these today, but I've got them listed on the screen here. And we do public education, which this is checking one of those boxes. Outreach, we'll do Waterfest, a couple different other events, but we really work hand in hand with the Cumberland River Compact. They do a lot of our education activities, and we're really happy to be working with them. We do public involvement and participation. That's kind of what you're involved in right now. We have an illicit discharge detection and elimination program, so we're required to identify priority areas that may be have a high potential for polluting stormwater. We have to do inspections in those areas, complete reports, and try to eliminate illicit discharges and illicit connections. We also have what we're really going to be focusing on, our construction site stormwater runoff control program, our permanent stormwater management program, and then pollution prevention and good housekeeping. So we're, like I said, we'll really focus on construction site stormwater runoff and then permanent stormwater management today. So for the past 2 years, since the issuance of the new MS4 permit, we've really been working on developing and implementing these program components. So before, you had different plans, like a public information and education plan, they call it a PI plan, and illicit discharge detection elimination plan. All those kind of were compiled into your stormwater management plan that made your program. But over the last 2 years, we've really been, I say we, me, the city engineer, the public works director, Christina, we've been working hard to actually come up with a plan that has a parent document for our stormwater management plan, and then all of these different components have standard operating procedures and guidance to kind of help the city move in the right direction towards compliance and continued compliance, and then kind of help everybody else that's coming and working within the city know what we're trying to accomplish. So it's been a long 2 years, and then of course working on our ordinance revisions. The ordinance just passed September 10th, 2024. Christine did a good job reviewing all of those major changes to the ordinance, but it's been a long time coming. We're happy to be moving forward and hopefully with a more efficient process. And so for construction site stormwater runoff, really the main component there is land disturbance permitting. So I'll talk to you about kind of the process changes that we've gone through over the last little bit. The city implemented an InterGov application, and you may be familiar with it if you worked with some of the surrounding municipalities. I think they've also used the same thing through Tyler Technologies. But it's called InterGov, and then kind of the user-facing side of it is Citizen Self-Service Portal. So I know Gallatin uses the same thing, so if you've done construction in Gallatin and gone through their permitting process, this is very much going to be the same. But the biggest change for us was absorbing the land disturbance permit plan review into the planning review cycle. Right now we have site plan, construction plan, planning department review. Your EPSC reviews are going to be incorporated with that review. So we've updated the checklist to incorporate EPSC requirements and ask for the appropriate documents so that everything's combined and is being accomplished and reviewed in one review period versus the back end where you would get your stamped approved plans from planning, and then you would come see me, and I would crush all your hopes and dreams and tell you it was going to be another 6 to 8 weeks before you could start construction. So very much so, this is a more efficient process. So soon, land disturbance permit applications will be submitted through the Citizen Self-Service Portal. I'll walk you through the process a little bit later. Fees will also be paid through that CSS portal. And then, like I said, this is really making the process more efficient by saving time with an additional review, and then also from having to go back and modify your site plan or construction plans because we required changes during the EPSC review. We're gonna have a lot of these little flow charts or process charts here, and I think we got the green here, so can't move on us. But if you'll take a look at everything, you'll have the planning review. So that'll go through that cycle. They on a pretty strict, like two week review period. So they're not going to be stagnant. A lot of times with LDP, it seemed like, you know, before we started working with consultants, we had a lot of lag time just because it was me and one other engineer that would be looking at plans. So once we moved into working with CC as our review consultant, we had a set time frame, but now with planning, the time frame's even shorter, so the turnaround's quicker. I mean, you're looking at typically, 7 to 10 days of getting comments back from the city. So a much more efficient process. Once you get your stamped approved plans, you'll submit your land disturbance permit application. And right now, that's coming directly to me, generally through email. But like I said before, we're slowly transitioning to the Citizen Self-Service Portal. So you'll go online. You'll be able to take your stamped approved plans, go online, complete the application, fill in all the fields, and then submit your plans and other supporting documents, and go through the process that way. And it'll be hopefully a seamless, quick process. Once I get that application, I'm going to draft a land disturbance surety request letter and send that to you. So basically, it's for site reclamation. If something happens with the project, funding falls through, something happens, the project goes under, that land disturbance surety will be there in the event that we need to reclaim the site and install whatever permanent structures are necessary, and then permanently stabilize the site. I think in all of the time I've been here and the people that have been here before me, I think they only took one land disturbance surety that I'm aware of. So usually things can get resolved pretty easily. Once you have your surety submitted to the city, we have that in hand. We're going to schedule a pre-construction meeting. Generally, Christina is the one that's going to be running those. I will attend if I'm available, and she does a very good job kind of going through the city's expectations for during construction, what's going to happen beforehand and during construction and after, and then kind of review our enforcement procedures. So once we have the pre-con, we're going to give you the okay to install your initial erosion prevention and sediment control measures. But we want a PE to come out and inspect the site and certify that the EPSC measures were installed per the plan and per the details. So they'll complete the PE EPSC certification form and submit that to me, and that's when Christina will schedule her initial inspection and come out, complete the inspection, and issue the permit if everything is installed per the plan. So just kind of a few details about the land disturbance permitting process. Christine touched on those. So during the planning review, either internal engineers or external consultant will review the quality and stormwater quality and quantity. Another thing, generally I'll go out and do preliminary investigations when we get a site plan or construction plan submittal, just to ensure that all water resources have been properly identified. Sometimes that would result, if we see something that's questionable, it would result in a request to do a hydrologic determination. We've had a few of those, but a lot of it revolves around just protecting those resources and then, checking to see if it's suitable habitat for the state endangered streamside salamander. Your land disturbance permit must be submitted with all your applicable state and federal permits. So really, we're focused on the construction general permits, ARAPs, and then any core permits. Then, of course, your surety, which is $10,000 per disturbed acre, and we round that up. And recently, in our discussions for our stormwater management program, we talked about adjusting that annually using CPI as a guide. And then, like I touched on before, a PE must visit the site and inspect the installed EPSCs and certify those prior to us scheduling an initial inspection. The reason why we started doing that is really just to save time, because you have so many sites that are ongoing and starting up that we would be going out to the same site 3 and 4 or 5 times for something simple like a construction access or that just wasn't installed properly. So that's why we really harp on just following your plan and following your details. And we really don't want to see any kind of redlining or anything like that prior to your initial, breaking ground. Like when we have that pre-con, we don't want it to be the first time that the contractor's seeing the plans and realizing it's not going to work for them. So, we really try to encourage that working together with all of your entities to ensure that we're not going to have everyone show up and realize that it's not going to work right out of the gate. So Christine talked about the 15-foot water quality riparian buffer requirement for individual lots, and kind of to cover just individual lots in general that are not part of a subdivision or larger common plan of development. We CC provided us with a form that they used for Bowling Green, and we modified it to suit just individual lots in the city. So this way, we have a quick form that a homeowner can fill out. They can select the option of what they want to install for their erosion prevention and sediment control if they're putting a pool in or doing any kind of grading activity on their property. That way, we don't have to issue a land disturbance permit specifically. It goes through the building permit process. So this is just a form. If you are a home builder in the city or you're building in a subdivision, this is a form you're going to see when you go to get your building permit for each lot. Hopefully, I think it's something that's easy to fill out and quick, and it really just, you can quickly identify selecting, an option or a combination of the options, what you want to install on the lot. But it's really more or less just a way to communicate with anyone that's doing work within the city, whether they're an individual property owner or a developer, that we have the expectation that you're going to install EPSC measures on each individual lot, and you're going to keep sediment on your site. So we did talk about the streamside salamander. They are state endangered, and there are several different requirements that kind of go along with being kind of a host to this amphibian. The main one is your ETW, stream buffer requirement. So you meet the criteria for a 60-foot buffer, 30-foot average, but that's the minimum. The other thing is we really encourage coordination with TWRA and TDEC on this one. So if you are developing and you have a stream that's probable habitat, we're really going to look closely at that. And TWRA is requiring surveys if you are within a 4-mile radius of a known salamander presence in another stream. So they say that that's kind of loosely based. Like here in Hendersonville, they've said more than likely we're going to ask for surveys just because they're everywhere in Hendersonville. So that's their general requirement. They want you to do a salamander between salamander survey between December 15th and March 15th. You have to do 2 of them, and they have to be at least 45 days apart. We don't require that. That's a TWRA requirement. So I urge you, if you're thinking about developing in an area where you have what looks to be like a wet weather conveyance or ephemeral stream, to have that coordination with them, because we're going to be looking at it closely too. And usually we kind of make that referral to, hey, you need to reach out to TWRA. Now, as far as in-stream construction restrictions, if the salamander has been confirmed in one of the streams or reaches on your property, TDEC will restrict in-stream construction from December 15th through March 31st. Or sorry, May 31st. June 1st is when you would be able to start again. So you have a good 6-month period where you can't be in the stream. So that's kind of something to think about. Now, if you're going to start a project and it's questionable that they may be in the stream, and you can't do the survey, they may ask you to wait. Now, you could do all your other grading, but it's specifically in-stream work that they're concerned about if there's a likelihood that the salamander's there. So we had a workshop yesterday, actually, where we had several grad students and PhDs talking about the salamander and the geographic distribution, and they did some telemetry studies and kind of studied their movements outside of the breeding season. And those recent studies suggest that adults may migrate far beyond the existing buffer width requirements that we have for ETWs. So kind of just to give you an idea, it was looking more like double, but that's not, those are not peer reviewed. It's just kind of different research projects, different studies happening. So like I said, we do perform preliminary site visits to go out and investigate. If we see a need, we will communicate that through the plan review. So I'm going to give you just an overview of the Citizen Self-Service Portal. We're in the test environment for it right now. So obviously we're going to go through it a couple different times before we really put that out to the public. But this is what you're going to be seeing. This is kind of the front end side of it that you're going to be seeing. So the website there is live. So if you have gone and applied for different permits or inspections, you've probably already seen it. You probably already have an account. Biggest thing is you do have to register for an account to be able to use it. So that's the main thing. And for our purposes, we want you to use a good email so that the same emails being used, you can receive pertinent information about inspections and permitting and all that. So this is what you'll see when you log in. You'll have the ability to click along the top there or select apply here. You'll be able to select land disturbance commercial, land disturbance individual lot, land disturbance residential. I just went over that standard EPSC for plot plans. So that's something you're filling out when you get a building permit. You do not have to apply for a land disturbance permit if you are less than an acre. Now, if you are building an individual home and you are going to be grading, doing land disturbance activities that exceed an acre, you would be completing the land disturbance individual lot application. And then, of course, your residential, which that's residential development. So like large scale subdivision. You'll go through the steps, and it's kind of hard to see. It's just a step process as you're completing the information, filling in the form. But you fill in your location. You'll be able to select that from a map system. You'll select the type of permit you want, whether it's a residential development, individual lot, or commercial. You'll add your contacts, so you'll be able to put who your contractor is, who the owner is, who your erosion specialist, your erosion control specialist is. And then, of course, more info. You'll attach all your pertinent documents, your CGP, NOC, ARAPs, any core permits, anything like that that's applicable. Then you'll sign an acknowledgement that you have read our code and you understand what you're supposed to be doing. Review and submit the application. Once you submit your application, you'll be prompted to pay the $50 application fee, and you can do that through CSS as well. And then it'll generate a permit number for you. So that permit number is what you'll use, when you're wanting to locate information. You also will have a dashboard, a user dashboard, so you'll be able to see all of your permits that you've obtained, the inspections that you've requested, and whatever plans you've uploaded, and then, of course, whatever fees are due. So I'm going to turn everything over to Christina. I'll be back up here to kind of talk briefly about our enforcement procedures, but next you'll be hearing from Christina Bannister.
Hello, everyone. I am here to kind of go over some stuff with you guys, and just an introductory to me, if you have not dealt with me before, I have worked for the city of Hendersonville for about a year now. I have previously worked for the city of Gallatin and the city of Union City, so I've worked throughout the state of Tennessee. I've also took a little hiatus over to the private side of construction, working for large data centers throughout Georgia and Alabama, but came on back to where my heart is, to local government. We will be coming over some facts about pre-construction meetings, during construction, what the expectations and the desires are for the city of Hendersonville, and just kind of bringing you up to key points, questions that you may want to ask to help you be successful as you're building in the city of Hendersonville. When you get done with your CSS portal and you have successfully got a stamped set of plans with our city, you will be instructed to get a pre-construction meeting with me. I call it a team meeting. We all get together, meeting of the minds. There'll be some required attendees, such as the permittee, which is the responsible party, the general contractor, which should be signed on to the notice of coverage or notice of intent, the grading contractor, which has the same responsibilities, and then the twice weekly inspectors, which are vital to you during your construction activities. These guys keep you, let me see if I can get this right. These guys keep you very compliant. They go over your site. They're going to go over in detailed inspections, and we'll kind of get into a little bit more of that here in just a little bit. Home builders will be required to do pre-construction meetings as well, but that's later on. If you're in a subdivision, we do our overall with the grading contractor, the permittee, but home builders will be required to meet with us along with the permittee. We want good expectations along the board, so the permittees know what they're getting into when the home builders do, and vice versa. Also, site engineers. It's been brought up to my attention that sometimes the site engineers want to come. I'm fine with that, but I host them. I'm only an inspector. The city engineer has to make any kind of changes, and that has to do with the site engineer and the city engineer. Helen Morrison, she's part of the pre-construction meetings from time to time, but also there can be no changes to the site itself or to the plans at this point. During the pre-construction meeting, there'll be discussion points. It's 4 sheets on a checklist, right? Only 2 of them will actually have some information that we'll go over. Some of that information will just go back and forth on meet and greet, going over responsibilities, documentation, plans. I just want to reiterate one more time, at this point of the game, there should be no redlining. We have approved set of plans, so we're getting started on the right foot. We're going to install everything on the initial EPSE stage and get that started then. Any concerns with that can be talked about, but any changes, like I said, has to go back to the site engineer and the engineer through the city. Processes, regs, and ordinances will need to be gone over. So any kind of expectations, enforcement, and closeout, we'll talk about all of those, the inspections. Before you get started in construction, as Helen talked about, we will have a initial inspection. The PE will be invited to come out and do an inspection. They'll have a certification form, which is part of the forms that we'll go through the checklist. The PE will go out there, they'll say it's good, they'll turn that in to the city. Helen will go over that, and you'll give me a call and say, hey, we're good to go, can you do your initial inspection? I will then go out there, make sure that everything's installed per that first stage of construction and the EPSC plans, and then we get started to construction. You'll be ready to go. You'll have the LDP. Right now I'm sending them by emails, so everybody will get an email saying, hey, you're ready to go. Good pre-con, good inspection, so everybody's happy at this point. During construction, we're going to talk about some stuff just to make sure that everybody's on the right foot. Inspections by the city of Hendersonville, I consider them audits. To me, please do not want us to come out and make sure that your site is specifically compliant. We are compliant to the MS4 permit, which we're contracted by the state. Your compliancy is done by your twice weekly inspector. Great communication between your on-site contractor and your twice weekly inspector, which a lot of the times I think you guys have third parties that you hire, is what I've seen for the most part. We have various ones throughout the city of Hendersonville. Please, I really encourage you to talk with them, meet with them. They're out there 2 times a week. See what your site needs, get that stuff fixed. If I go out there and see something, I'm going to ask you to fix it. You'll have an amount of days to fix it. But once it goes to the twice, it's a little bit more escalated with the new ordinance that we have. What I look at specifically when I go out there, outfalls, site box, so any of your site information, your ARAPs, any of your permits, your NOC, your twice weekly inspections, I'm making sure that when they note stuff, it's getting taken care of in a timely manner, which is 7 days by the CGP. And perimeter measures during all stages of construction. So that means beginning, throughout the middle, and at the end, I'll be doing just final inspections for construction. Inspection reports will be made available through the CSS, which is something that Helen kind of went into detail about with you guys. You can get on there now and see anything that I've made comments about, any pictures that I've taken. Eventually, we will move away from the email. So if you have me on an email chain right now, it's usually very long if you build for years. It's not fun on your phone. You're probably going to want to do it on a computer. But I do that for, it holds me accountable. Most priority sites, which I'll get into that later, but most priority sites, the city is mandatory to go out there once a month minimum. So you're going to see in my email chain where I've been out there each month, and all of the attachments, what I've said, the pictures that I've given. But eventually we will move away from that, and there'll be CSS portals. Phone calls can be made. I'll still probably do an email every now and again. For the most part, it's going to be on the CSS. The desire is to move towards the customer self portal. We will need to have accurate contact information for the permittees, foremen, grading contractors, general contractors, anybody that you want to be able to access this portal. It's vital for us to have that information. If you want them to see it, if their job is to make sure that you're compliant and that everything's going well, they'll need to be involved on this portal. Inspector-wise, on all of your sites, minimally, you're going to have me. Yay. Nobody's excited right now. Twice weekly, thanks Helen. Twice weekly inspectors through the state of Tennessee, unless it's changed, it's just when it's over an acre. If you're under an acre through the city of Hendersonville, you still may have me on a complaint-based issue, or I might just be going by there because there's critical environmental areas. So minimally, you'll have me, but you may have to have a twice weekly inspector as well if you're over an acre. You may have to have more if you decide to disturb over 50 acres. If you do that, I'll get a little bit more into that later on in the slide, but just minimally, that's where we're at. Another inspector for Public Works is Tommy Hoffman. I talk about him pretty often during the pre-construction meetings. That way everybody's aware when they're doing sidewalks, road, or public storm. He will be inspecting that, so I'll give you his information. He will not be part of the pre-construction meeting. There's only one of him here too, so we're kind of spread out pretty thin, but Tommy's here today too. Some key points I wanted to go over. to make sure you guys are successful. I don't like anybody getting surprised. I know when I was on the construction side, I didn't like getting into stuff 3 or 4 times. I wanted to get it taken care of, so I'm just gonna kind of go over some stuff and hit some highlights. If you're over 50 acres and you're disturbing more than 50 acres, there will be a lot of extra inspections between the state and the city, and they will be required to be on site. I will be looking in that box to make sure it's in there. That's part of an audit item that I know the state will ask for when they come and audit us. They do audit us on construction site runoff as one of our 6 minimum measures. So just FYI, that site box, and if you're already dealing with me, you know I'm like, what's in your site box? Do you have your NOC? Do you have your LDP in there? Those things are minimal. So those are easy things that should be on site. It helps your twice weekly inspector. All of those things should be on there. Priority sites with the city of Hendersonville, they're a little different. With the new ordinance, construction sites discharging into or immediately upstream of Tennessee waters of the state. That means unavailable perimeters for siltation or exceptional Tennessee waters. Also, our little friendly salamander here, you want to be aware of him. One thing that came up here recently, I've had 2 or 3 people ask about it, so I wanted to go ahead and hit on that. The difference between land disturbance permits and notice of coverage permits to the state. As far as inspections, when you start, you'll get your NOC first. Kind of give you a timeline. 9 times out of 10, if you're over an acre, you're going to get your NOC first to the state. You will eventually get an LDP. Your twice weekly inspections will start when you're released to break ground. So when we have a pre-con and I say, you're good to go, get that first initial stage of EPSCs in the ground, your twice weeklies will start then. They can stop when your notice of termination is inactive through the state, when they're closed out. My inspections, or the city's inspections per se, will stop once the land disturbance permit is closed out, once everything's been met there. Does that make sense to everybody? Yay, fun. Buffers and streams, want to just kind of hit on them. It's going to be something during construction that we're going to have them noted. People are going to have to know where they're at. They're going to have to be staked out and surveyed. Almost every plan that I see, there's some kind of tree protection, snow fencing, construction fencing around those critical areas for environments such as wetlands, streams, buffers. It will be required that during construction that you have those things noted and staked out through all of construction. So during the beginning of, let's just say, home building, when you're out there mass grading, you'll have to have it up then. And when they're building homes, even most importantly, you'll have to have it up then. Because you have different contractors, so many different contractors out there running in skid steers and everything else in lulls. They'll run right through it not knowing what it is. So we have to make sure that orange fencing or whatever that's on the plans, the approved set of plans, it's identified. We know that's a place that we don't need to get into. I want to hit on ARAPs and ETWs. As far as ARAPs, I want to remind everybody these have time restraints. They have expiration dates. Also with that, you have the friendly salamander playing into that. So if you're in a stream, working in a stream, and you have an ARAP, please coordinate your times between the ARAP and your salamander friends, because you can only get in the stream and work between December 15th to June 1st, and you want to coordinate that time right. So make sure you get your ARAPs taken care of, those critical areas taken care of in a timely manner before the expiration date or before December 15th or after June 1st. Expectations during construction. One of the main things I want to bring up is approved stamped set of plans for the city of Hendersonville. You kind of see the lovely stamps over here. Just wanting to let everybody know what those look like. I would like for when we do our pre-construction meeting for everybody to have the same set of plans and they're all stamped. That's the goal. That's the desire. That way we get out there and everybody's building on the same thing. Install the EPSCs and SEMs per the city's approved set of plans. I have phone calls from time to time, guys, that they're like, Christina, what do you want me to do? And my reply is going to be every time, keep your sediment to yourself and build per the city approved set of plans. So if that helps you in any way, form, or fashion, go back to your plans. I'm just an inspector. Just build it per the plans. If you need changes, go to your site engineer, talk with them ahead of time. Don't kick the can down the road. Go ahead and get it taken care of right now to help us all to keep moving and keep it going. That way it can get to our city engineer and we can get a resubmittal if there needs to be a change to any kind of permanent SEMs. Outlet protections, construction accesses, inlet protections, basins, structures in the basins, the BMPs, the spillways, all that good stuff. I will be inspecting those throughout construction. I might not hit every single one of them every time, but construction accesses are a big thing. It doesn't matter if it's out here off of Main Street where we have the most traffic, or if you're in a subdivision internally and there's people living in there. We want to make sure that we're cleaning up. The city's desire and in the municipal code is to keep that stuff cleaned up on a daily basis or as needed. So just to kind of give you an overview of those expectations, those are things that I kind of just automatically thought of. Also, converting sediment traps or basins. I think Christine hit on this earlier. There's a 14-day notice to submit to the city. So when you're out there in your building and you're grading and you're getting ready, please make sure you submit something to us before you go out and convert something without us knowing. A lot of times on your plans, it says you have to have stabilization. That also means the home's being built if you're in a subdivision. That doesn't mean that when you temporarily stabilize something, that counts that. So just FYI, I hate for you to get in there. I hate going back and doing stuff twice, and I know you guys do too. It's time and money on everybody. So please go ahead, contact us. That way we can get that set aside and approve that for you guys. Limits of disturbance is a big thing. I'm kind of a stickler as far as an inspector. I hope that helps you guys. If you're out somewhere that's outside of your limits of disturbance, please get back into your limits of disturbance. If you have to get out of there, it should be on your approved set of plans. If you've got some kind of off-site utilities, please get out there, get that stuff done, and come back in. Get it stabilized. All parties should know where your limits of disturbance is at. That includes your twice weekly inspector. That keeps us all compliant. So when they're out there inspecting everything, they know where your limits of disturbance is at. We shouldn't be out there at any point set a time to where there's a grading contractor, me, and a twice weekly inspector all looking and trying to find either buffers or limits of disturbance. It's a bad situation. We don't need to be running into that. So to keep everybody on a good foot, let's make sure we know where our limits of disturbance is at. Quality stormwater control measures, which are also SEMs. When is it time for it? A lot of times in your plans, it's going to say it's time for it when there's so much stabilization, a 70% stabilization or a 90% stabilization. Whatever's written in your plans, that's when you need to put it in. Don't put those in too early, because sometimes if you have sediment getting into SEMs, you have to go back in it at the end when I'm doing my final inspections, and you got to go back in there and clean it out. That can be bioswales, retention ponds, detention ponds, any of that stuff. Controlling runoff during all stages, that includes sodding and stockpiles. Just FYI, guys, when you get to that point, you know if you make stockpiles at the toe of the slope and you have two stockpiles, you know you're making a concentrated flow. Just make sure you're leery of that while you're building. I'm not going to tell you not to do it. I'm not going to tell you to do your job, but as a contractor and you work in the state of Tennessee, you know how that goes when you're going into a silt fence. It doesn't go well. So just keep that ahead of yourselves. If it comes to a point during construction that we're building and there's negligence and it seems like we are getting illicit discharge, it's going into streams, it's going into environmental areas, or there's repeated deficiencies, this is where our enforcement response plan kind of comes in. The city of Hendersonville is required to have an enforcement response plan through the state permit. Every municipal can adopt that as they need. This is just a guide to let us know what we need to be doing. I try to be very fair and work with everybody, but I feel like it's time, and when Helen says it's time, it's going to be a little bit more stringent coming up. So your twice weekly inspector keeps you compliant, but when I go out there, you're going to have 7 days with a verbal or written warning. So I'll come out, I'll tell you, or you'll get a written warning saying, hey, you got 7 days to fix this. If I go out there again, that means there's twice in a month I'm going out there again. And I'm like, hey, you still have an illicit discharge, or your silt fence down, there's issues, you got track out, there's stuff going on. You'll have a CAT plan or a corrective action plan. They'll have to be submitted to our city engineer. You'll then have 10 days. After that point, it escalates. It starts withholding plan approvals. Maybe you've got several different phases to a site. and it can uphold any kind of inspections or code inspections with the city. After that point, I get to Helen, I start telling her we have a problem in our environmental areas, and then I turn it over to her. It goes into stop work order status, and that's kind of the flow that I go through. I know that recently, if you've worked with me, there's like a first, a second, a third offense. At this point, there'll be no more of that with this new ordinance and this new ERP plan. You have twice weekly inspectors for that. I encourage you to talk to them. I encourage for good understanding and talk to them about what you hired them for. They're there to keep you compliant. I'm just there for the MS4. So just, not that I don't want to talk to you guys, but just saying, talk to your guys that you hired for that. Stay compliant, keep your stuff, have a good BMP stage already at the end of each day. Keep your stuff up, and you probably won't run into that. Helen, if you want to kind of talk about the stop work order process, it kind of goes out of my realm once it goes to her, and it gets her involved and a few other people. And then once you get done, I got to go back into stabilization. Yep.
Yeah, so obviously we're trying to move forward and progress and be reasonable with how we approach our enforcement actions. But I think for the longest time, we've kind of had a time period of just being stagnant, kind of in that, hey, you need to get this fixed, and a lot of times it either doesn't get fixed or we just kind of, there's lots of different delays. With Christina coming on and being very persistent and having clear, concise communication, we've seen lots of improvement from our construction sites within the city. So I think she's been doing a very good job, but I think we've had a lot of contractors and developers that are being very responsive to the inspections and the deficiencies that are being identified. So once we get to the stop work order, we're going to have a meeting. It could really be called like a show cause hearing. We're going to call the applicable parties in to meet with us, either here in the office or we'll go out to the site to take a look at what's going on. And it won't just be me. It'll usually be at least Stephen and maybe even our Public Works Director, Sarah Locke. We'll evaluate the plans, we'll look at the deficiencies and the violations that are identified, and then we'll make a determination if we're going to proceed with the stop work order or there's a way to resolve the issue quicker than shutting everything down. Obviously, time is money, so we want to avoid shutting people down. Next, if we issue the stop work order and the violation continues, then we will move forward with a civil penalties assessment using our enforcement response plan penalty calculator. The city has the ability to issue administrative penalties in the amount of between $50 and $5,000 per violation per day. So obviously, if we just started throwing numbers out without any kind of guidance, it's a little subjective. So we developed a penalty calculator tool to help. And this is just there's two additional sections underneath that, one for illicit discharge detection, elimination, and then permanent SEMs. So if you fail to maintain your SEMs, there's also a component, but this is mainly for our construction activities, so it kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking at. So you have a number of violations. Obviously, that'll be, 1 through whatever, and then if you've impacted our MS4, or the buffer, or water of the state, however you've done that, that'll be a multiplier, and then of course, if you have previous NOVs, and that gives us the penalty. So this is not our immediate go-to, but obviously, as it said on the previous side, the ERP is a guide. So at any point in time, we could skip the first 3 steps in that process and go to something if the violation is egregious. Okay, so it's not gonna be, I have 7 days, then I have 10 days, then I have another 10 days, or it's nothing where you're gonna be doing math like that. If we're giving you a time frame, obviously we expect an immediate response to eliminate or resolve whatever issues are identified. But we use discretion, and each site is different, each violation is different, so just keep that in mind. But we just rolled this out. It actually went before our Public Works Committee for review. I haven't had a chance to review their comments or questions on it, but this is the direction that we're moving. So if we do have continued violations or, frequent offenders on the same site, then we will utilize the calculator to administer penalties to the site.
Okay, now that we got over the bad part, I feel like we all just got speeding tickets. End of construction inspection for stormwater. This is the good part. We're at the end, we're getting ready to turn over, and we're getting ready for the inspections. So storm infrastructure is a big thing, especially if it's something that the city's going to accumulate and we're going to own. We want our citizens to be taken care of. We want the capacity of them to be at full rate, which means I will be looking down, and I will also be looking at documentation of have we been allowing debris to get into the storm infrastructure. More than likely, at one point or another, I've put, hey, it's great, or hey, you've had a blowout, let's get that cleaned out. So the famous saying, only rain in the drain, is a true statement, especially when it comes to our subdivisions and what's coming over into the city and to our city tax dollars and all that good stuff, or fees. TVN may be required, so just keep that in mind when you start seeing stuff in my paperwork that says, hey, you've got sediment in there, it's starting to get at full capacity, or it's starting to show some capacity, you need to get that cleaned out. I highly recommend to go ahead and just get that removed. That way it doesn't travel. Removing all the EPSCs, all of our temporary measures, just go ahead and get them out once we have stabilization. And then our SEMs, our permanent stormwater control measures, we want to inspect them, make sure they're good to go. That includes our water quality units, retention, detention structures, all the BMPs of the basin, your spillways, make sure they're installed properly, swells, and outlet protections. The city of Hendersonville, I noticed when I started working here, they do not love riprap as outlet protection in our subdivisions. So just FYI, if you have it during construction on your plans, you're probably gonna have to change that over at one point or another. If it doesn't have a clear and concise outlet protection or SEM measure, go ahead and ask your site engineer ahead of time to, hey, how do you want me to build that? Because more than likely, you and I are going to be having a discussion about how that's supposed to be built. Because I'll have to do an inspection, and it's got to pass on through to have all the fun stuff like UNOs, COs, and surety releases. Off-site areas disturbed needs to be brought back to a natural previous state. I see this more so in commercial sites because they don't have a lot of room, so they have to use off-site stuff every now and again. We just need to make sure we're changing back the topo, or stabilizing everything the way it used to be in order to get the full surety release. Stabilization, since we've had changes, I wanted to go ahead and talk about this. I've seen a lot of sites that has boulders or rocks in the grass that's getting handed over to our citizens. That is not okay. We need to make sure we've got topsoil down there. We need to make sure we're putting in our topsoil, that the grass is going to grow. There's not going to be erosion heading into our streams, into our environmental areas. That is something I am looking at as far as surety releases when I'm walking up and down through there and it's a final walk through phase 1, or if it's a commercial site, I will hold up the surety release. I'll talk to Helen. I'll talk to the city engineer. There'll be pictures, and we will hold up surety releases when it comes to something that is not stabilized. Kind of want to talk about slope percentage as well. When we're getting into proper stabilization, please look at your plans on how you're supposed to be stabilizing anything that's over 35% if you're going to be stabilizing it. Also, city permanent stabilization and the newest ordinance that's been passed. I wanted to go ahead and put that definition. I'm going to kind of save it, but please, when you have time and you like to warm up by the fire at night, you might want to look at that and just make sure that you're meeting that. Equivalencies might be riprap or permanent geotextiles. There's all kinds of different measures that you can put in place of that. And that is all for me.
All right.
I'm sorry, I'm so sorry.
This is the last bit. I
We'll need
promise.
therapy
Do we
after
have
this.
Do we have any questions online? Okay, so, all right, I promise, we're almost done. And for the long haul. So, obviously, Christina went through our during construction, and we're getting into our closeout process for the land disturbance surety release. Christine touched on several of the documents that are going to be required to get your money back. So obviously, you have $10,000 per acre rounded up. That's a lot of money when it comes down to it, whether it's 1 acre or 50. It's a lot of money. So we want to have a seamless process to get that money back to you, but we do require certain documents to be submitted to get that land disturbance surety released. We require the TDEC notice of termination. They want to, of course, terminate their permit, but we want to ensure that you've terminated the permit, so technically you wouldn't be able to go back out and start construction. So we want everything closed out that is permitting active construction at the site. Next, we will require professional engineer permanent SCM certification form. Christine talked about all the different documents or requirements that the state has put on the MS4 for permanent SCMs, location, our responsible party, the inspection and maintenance frequencies, all that. All those things are going to be contained within your inspection and maintenance agreement and your long-term maintenance plan, but requiring photos and the location of these SEMs, and then just a certification from a professional engineer that they are functioning as designed. That's kind of just our I guess, backup to the as-built. We have somebody stamping a sheet, and they're certifying that these measures are functioning as they were designed and as installed. So we really kind of put that responsibility back on the developer, because we don't have the resources to go out there and continually inspect these and recommend whatever maintenance. So it's nice to have a form so that, you got a question? Okay. As-built plans, a lot of these documents are kind of supporting documents. So the as-built plans are Hendersonville Asset Management Workbook. So that's the Excel spreadsheet that Christine touched on. And really that's helping the city map our storm sewer system and being able to provide that to the state as well as part of our MS4 permitting. So your stormwater inspection and maintenance agreement, long-term maintenance plan, we have we have all of these forms online, and we have an example LTMP online. We recently updated our inspection and maintenance agreement because of the requirement for the SCM inspection and maintenance certification training course. So because inspectors are required to have that certification to do inspections of permanent SCMs, we had to update the inspection and maintenance agreement to include that. Some additional guidance for your as-built plans. You must provide as-built contours for ponds and certify storage requirements for pre and post development. All of those get submitted to me for review, and then when I receive them, I generate kind of calling it another permit, like a post-construction stormwater permit, which basically certifies the site and permits the site to discharge stormwater into the MS4 or waters of the state. Well, we can't. Our MS4 permit is what allows us to discharge to waters of the state, but this basically kind of covers any discharges from developments within the city for inspection, long-term inspection and maintenance. Your inspection and maintenance agreement, long-term maintenance plan must be recorded with the Sumner County Register of Deeds in its entirety. We've had a couple calls about the cost involved with that, but because the intent is for that to stay with the property forever, we want the document in its entirety to be recorded, so there's no question if somebody ends up buying the property, they understand what is required of them when they take possession of it. Like I said, all these forms are on the City of Hendersonville Post-Construction Permanent Stormwater Management website, and I can actually send those out when Catherine, with the PowerPoint when Catherine sends that. Christine really touched on all these, why we require all these documents, but sometimes people like to actually see where it's required. So these are the sections from the MS4 permit that require all these, requires us to develop a storm sewer system map. That's why we have the asset management workbook. We're required to develop and implement a verification process to document that the SCMs have been installed per design specifications within 90 days of the installation. So that's why we have our SCM certification form and have those as-built submitted. And then, of course, we're required to ensure that permanent SCMs are inspected and maintained in perpetuity. So we have to have legally binding agreement and a plan in place to do that. And we're required, of course, to track all SCMs within the city. So we're going to use the same process for our permanent SCMs and inspection and maintenance agreements, all that, as we do for land disturbance permitting, but we're slowly working to it. Right now, everything just gets submitted to me. In the long run, we will go through Intergov, through the Citizen Self-Service Portal, so you'll be able to log in and submit an annual report for your SCMs, and that would be due per our inspection and maintenance agreement. It's due on July 1st of each year. That's just a little process chart. So obviously we generate your post-construction stormwater permit. We give you the number because that's going to be attached to your IMA LTMP. And then you complete your inspection and maintenance throughout the year per your long-term maintenance plan. The frequency of inspections is indicated on your plan. And then, of course, recommended maintenance. And then each year on July 1st, we'll submit that annual report. We'll have a form available online, and you can upload pictures and all that through the Citizen Self-Service Portal. We're at the Q&A part. I don't think we have any online at this point, but does anybody here have questions? No? All right. Well, thank y'all for coming. Thank everybody who's online, I guess.
Yeah, thank you all for coming, and let's give a round of applause to the City of Hendersonville and CEC for all the
Yes,
work
thank
putting
you.
all this together
Thank y'all.
and presenting on it. So thank you all. So yeah, we will send out, this was recorded, so we'll send that out for reference. We'll send out a link to the previous presentation about that water, that WQTV table that we did about a year ago or so. So you'll have that, and then any other links from the City of Hendersonville for those forms and documents, so you have those for reference as well. So with that, thank you all for coming, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.